Okay, so let's continue on with The Shining, and I want to kind of finish talking about Jack the character and start moving on to some larger themes, and then we can kind of wrap this up. Oh, before I do that, actually, I'm gonna I just want to I'm looking at my notes, and there's one thing I want to say, and I don't know where it should go, so I'm just gonna say it. I love one thing I love in this movie, um, is the way that the title cards become radically more unhelpful and deranged as the movie continues. It mirrors Jack's own craziness. So the first one you see is the interview, and then closing day, which is when they close their apartment and move to the hotel. Um, but then after that, they start, and then you get 1 month later, which lets you know Jack's been working on his book for a month and it hasn't been going well because at the end of the month he doesn't have anything. So fine, but then you get Tuesday, which and this really was extra funny to me after COVID, because when you are locked in place like the Overlook, what the day of the week has no meaning, right? Like on week, you need to know the days of the week because it's when stores are open or when they're closed, or if it's Saturday, people aren't at work. They tend to stay up later on Friday and Saturday nights, and there are events going on or whatever. And during COVID, it was the same thing. Like for people who are working from home, the days have no meaning. Like you could just, what's the difference between Saturday and Tuesday? You're not allowed to leave the house. Same thing for them at the Overlook, right? They're not allowed. Every day is potentially the same day. Like there's no what makes Saturday different from Tuesday, in a place like Overlook Hotel or when you're quarantining under COVID and working from home. Every day is the same. Um, so um, so then it says Tuesday, and then it says Thursday, and then it says Saturday, and then it says Monday, and then it says, what difference does it make? It's a funny cut. It lets you know that a couple of days have gone by, so I guess that's helpful. Although, it, fine. But then it's 8 a.m. Why do it's getting more specific and more useless. Who cares if it's 8? I guess he's on a plane at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's not, they're not super helpful. And then that's it. Then that's the last one. You know what I mean? They're not super helpful title cards. They become more and more useless and crazy as the movie goes on. They're really just used as editing gags. They're just a chance to drop the hammer on the audience and be like, next thing. So I don't know where to put that, but I wanted to say that. Okay. Now I'm going to give you one of my favorite film things from, I hope this is one of the more useful things you get in film class, because it's one of my favorite film principles. So I want to kind of let you know what it is so you can think about it. Camille Paglia, who wrote a book about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. Geez, this helicopter is really doing the thing. So Camille Paglia, who wrote a book on Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, said, the trick to understanding science fiction and horror movies and supernatural movies and things is to summarize it without mentioning the monsters. This is a really useful thing. Because the monster is more like a metaphor for whatever's going on in the story. It's not the monster. Movies should be about characters changing. That's what that's what stories are supposed to show you, is a character struggling and changing. Something weird happens. Sorry, I got distracted. So it's supposed to be about characters changing. So I could pick some examples of movies, but I don't know. I wish I had you guys with me so you could suggest. Maybe you could suggest some in the discussion board. But let's take a movie like Freddy Krueger, right? It's a movie about a guy with claws for fingers who cuts up little kids in their dreams. How do you summarize that movie without discussing Freddy Krueger? Well, it's a movie about Freddy Krueger is a child molester. Before he was Freddy Krueger, he was like a regular person. And the parents, at the end of the movie, the teenagers are being hunted by this guy. They live in suburbia. That's important because what the movie is about kids who are unprepared for the dangers of the real world because their parents want them to live in nice suburbia and don't want to tell them about the bad things in the world. In the course of the movie, the kids learn that child molesters are a thing and that their parents murdered one. And once they understand that, they're able to fight evil. But their parents have been sheltering them in suburbia. A simpler one you might be more familiar with is Godzilla. Most people think Godzilla is a movie just about a giant monster who destroys cities. And that is what's happening on screen. But one way of thinking about that movie without the monster, it gives you a better idea of what's really going on in the film. Godzilla is a story set in Japan in the 1950s. And it is about a giant creature who comes from out of the ocean or from over the ocean, and he destroys Japanese cities with radioactive breath. A lot of people miss that detail. They think he breathes fire. He doesn't breathe fire, radioactive breath. So that's the story. Well, that's interesting because 9 years before the movie was made, America flew airplanes over Japan and destroyed Japanese cities with radioactive bombs. So it's really a movie about about your city being destroyed. An outsider shows up and blows up your city. Godzilla is a metaphor for America. We could do this with piles of things. King Kong is the story of a bunch of greedy white guys who go to Africa and they kidnap a living creature there, and they put him in chains and they put him in the bottom of a boat and they bring him back to America where they expect him to make money for them, and then he escapes and wants revenge. King Kong is a story about slavery in America. Also, crucially, he falls in love with a white woman as part of his rampage. So it's a metaphor for slavery and America's anxieties about slavery. So we can do this with piles and piles of movies, right? Zombie movies are about hordes of poor people, raggedy poor people that are sort of going to overthrow everything, and you have to, and it's right, they're always destroying they're always in the mall and destroying things. Vampires are a metaphor for rich people. Why? Because they live in a castle and they're rich and they live off they live by feeding off of poor people. It's a metaphor for rich people. Jeff Bezos at Amazon makes money because you give him money to buy things online. He's living by taking your money. He's a vampire. Like, he's got a big castle and he lives up there, and the little peasants run around, and he just treats everybody like crap. So when you do that, what's The Shining about? Um, Forget the ghosts, because ghosts aren't real, so it's not about that. Bad movies are when they make it about the monster. Good movies are when they use the monster to tell a story about human beings. So what's The Shining about? The Shining is a story about The Shining is a story about a guy who's frustrated with his family. He blames his family for his lack of success in life, and he's so angry about it that he tries to kill all of them. But there's a little detail that I really like. Why does it take him so long? And it's really interesting. There's a little detail in the film that I really enjoy, which is that he's talking to the bartender Lloyd, and he says about Danny. When Wendy says Danny's been strangled, Jack Nicholson's acting, he seems legitimately upset. Like, he seems horrified that Danny is hurt. He really is very, very, he's not like fucking around anymore. He's upset. He has a horrible dream and he's really genuinely moved and upset. And he says he likes Danny. He's mad at Wendy and he hates Wendy because she won't let it go. He hurt Danny's arm and she's never going to forgive me. But crucially, he says, and he calls her a sperm bank, like she's just someone for him to have sex with. It's a horribly hateful thing to say about a woman, that she's just there. She's just a vagina for him to pump sperm into. It's such a gross thing to say. That's such a terrible moment. But he also says about Danny, he says, I love the little son of a bitch, which is really interesting, that phrase, son of a bitch, right? He's the son of a bitch. Like, he thinks his wife is a bitch. I love the little son of a bitch. I'd do anything for him. He wants to kill Wendy, and what causes him to hesitate is he doesn't want to kill Danny. He tells the bartender, I love the little son of a bitch, but Wendy won't let it go. One time I hurt him. So he wants to kill Wendy, but he hesitates because he genuinely loves his son. It's a little detail that often gets lost, but he really likes him. And so the movie is the story of, like, the hotel's really trying to get him to get over that hurdle and kill both of them, because that's what the hotel wants. All right, I'll pick it up in the next video.